I don't usually make a point of highlighting certain clips, but you guys have to see this one. Now, getting headshots in this game is not particularly difficult. The reason this clip is awesome is because it's a consistent 5 headshots in a row. One of the hardest things I've found to improve upon when playing any competitive video game is consistency. And that's one of the main factors I considered when creating this personal top 5 list. The other two, which are closely linked to consistency, are accuracy and comfort. As the title states, I've used over 35 different gaming mice, and in this video, I wanted to share my top 5. I want to place particular emphasis on the word my. These are my personal top 5 gaming mice. These are not necessarily the mice I would recommend for everyone. As always, timestamps will be below in the comments section if you want to skip around. Before we get into it, there are a few things I want to point out. First, what matters to me most in a gaming mouse is shape. While this is my #1 priority, it may not be yours. Fortunately, we're at the point now where gaming mice sensors are so good that as long as it's a PixArt 3310 or above, the vast majority won't really need to worry about tracking performance. From there, the next most important thing to me is buttons, namely size, placement, and pre/post travel. I don't really care that much about scroll wheel, mouse feet, or cable. Scroll wheel is rarely, if ever, the deciding factor between getting a kill and dying in a game. Mouse feet, while important, can almost always be easily replaced with aftermarket skates. And the same goes for cable. A poor mouse cable's issues can also be mitigated with something like a mouse bungee. Furthermore, I have a roughly 20 by 10.5 centimeter hand, and I use a palm-claw hybrid grip. I also have a strong preference for ergo mice, so you're not going to see many ambidextrous mice on my list, since the majority of those mice are for primarily claw or fingertip grip users. This includes, but is not limited to, mice like the Logitech G Pro Wireless, Razer Viper, Glorious Model O, and Zowie S series. In fact, there's really only one ambidextrous mouse on my list, and it's not any of the aforementioned. Before I get flamed into the next century, again, I want to stress this is my personal top 5 list. These are not necessarily the same mice I would recommend for someone else, especially if they use a claw or fingertip dominant grip style. You also need to factor in hand size. With all that out of the way, these are my top 5 gaming mice, starting with my least favorite. At number 5, we have the Zowie ZA12. Now, this is a mouse I haven't even technically reviewed on my channel, mainly because I just got it a few months ago. I did, however, review the Zowie ZA11, its bigger brother, almost 2 years ago, and I spoke very highly of it. I did have some comfort issues with the ZA11. Thankfully, the smaller size of the ZA12 seems to have mitigated the majority of those. On paper, the ZA12 is nothing special. It's got a 3310 optical sensor, buttons are too stiff in my opinion, and the cable is just good, not great. Where it does excel is shape. I don't know how Zowie manages to consistently create such fantastic mouse shapes, but they really do have some of the best, and that's why it's number 5 on my list, and the only official ambidextrous mouse here. I say official because I do want to include an honorable mention for the Finalmouse Ultralight Sunset Edition. That is one of the few mice I regret selling. In my opinion, it's better than the Air 58 because its sides are solid plastic as opposed to the Air 58's honeycomb shell sides. While the cable is much worse on the Sunset, I also prefer the added weight as I find the Air 58 too light for my liking. The Finalmouse Ultralight Sunset would have taken the number 5 spot, but I decided not to officially include it because Finalmouse only produced a very limited number of them. Since it's no longer in production, you can only get one by paying an obscene amount of money for one on eBay. Moving on, at number 4 we have the new Razer DeathAdder V2. I said in a previous video that this was the best DeathAdder Razer has produced yet, and I still stand by that. They've made minor yet significant changes to the latest iteration. When you already have a mouse as solid as something like the DeathAdder Elite, any minor positive changes are important. It's got a very popular and well-known shape, which they actually slightly improved. The flare in the front, particularly on the right side, has been reduced, making it feel a bit more like the Razer Mamba, which I think overall has a better shape, but the reason it's not sitting at number 4 is because of its weight. The V2 is impressively light for a large mouse at just around 80 grams. Of course, you also get a top-notch sensor and a fantastic stock cable and mouse feed. Really, I don't have anything bad to say about the new DeathAdder. It's a fantastic large-size ergo mouse. The reason it's not higher on my list is because it's just not as comfortable for me as the other 3 mice. It is, however, about the same in terms of accuracy compared to my number 3 pick, the Gigabyte XM3. Objectively, this mouse has a lot of room for improvement. The cable is really bad and too thin to stay put in my Zowie made mouse bungee. The mouse feet are good, but could have been thicker. And the scroll wheel has to be one of the worst I've come across. Very little tactility in its steps. So why the hell is it sitting at number 3 on my list? Well, its shape is one of the best I've come across. It's impressively comfortable and I can aim exceptionally well with it. The buttons are pretty good, though the side buttons have significant room for improvement. The only reason it's not higher is because of its weight. It sits too close to 100 grams. At number 2, we have the G-Wolves G302. This mouse really kind of came out of nowhere and surprised me. It's essentially a Zowie EC2 clone with better buttons. It's also a bit lighter and a lot cheaper. It can be had for just $30 shipped. You are, however, getting a worse sensor and cable compared to the Zowie. One thing I do want to caution potential buyers about is the G302's unusually high liftoff distance. I measured it to be between 2 and 3 DVDs. Personally, it never really bothered me, but it's something to be aware of. The G302 also comes with the best stock feet I have ever used on a mouse. They somehow feel better than Hyperglide's, but I'm suspecting that might just be placebo. If you want to try the popular EC2 shape, but don't want to shell out $70 for it, the G302 is a great starting point. I highly recommend it for anyone wanting a medium-sized ergo mouse. If you've watched some of my recent videos, this number 1 pick should come as no surprise. It's the glorious Model D. This mouse has it all. In terms of shape, it's somewhere in between the Zowie EC1 and EC2, leaning a bit more towards the latter. It's very light at around just 70 grams, and as you can see, it does have that honeycomb shell pattern, but unlike other ultra lightweight mice, it doesn't extend to the sides. This results in a much more premium feeling mouse. The buttons and cable are also great, and I have no complaints about the scroll wheel or mouse feet. Oh, and you also get a top-notch sensor. The real icing on the cake here is the price. It starts at just $50 US. The main reason the glorious Model D is my number 1 is because for me, it has the best combination of comfort and accuracy. The longer you use a mouse, the more important comfort is going to be. For accuracy, you also need to factor in consistency. Unfortunately, this is very difficult to objectively measure. There are too many factors and variables to account for when playing multiplayer games. You kind of just have to almost guess and go by feel. Anyway guys, that's my top 5 list as of April 2020. Hopefully you found it somewhat helpful or at least entertaining. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section and I'll do my best to get back to you. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
Down!
Holy shit.
shit.